Pontiac didn't die because people stopped loving it. It died while people were still buying the shirts, the posters, the hats. While car meets were still packed with Firebirds and GTOs, Pontiac didn't fade away. It was cut. And the reason General Motors pulled the plug has almost nothing to do with sales, and everything to do with a mistake made decades earlier that finally came due. Most people think Pontiac was killed because GM was broke in 2009. That's the easy answer. It's also the wrong one. If you've ever wondered why a brand with that much history, that much culture, and that much emotional pull just vanished overnight, you're about to see Pontiac very differently. And once you do, you'll realize it was never really about Pontiac at all. Stick with this story, because near the end, there's a moment inside GM headquarters that explains everything. And it's brutal. Pontiac started as a personality, not a brand. Back in the 1960s and 70s, Pontiac was the rebel inside General Motors. Chevy was the everyman. Buick was your uncle with a steady job. Cadillac was the dream. Pontiac was the guy revving his engine at a red light. The GTO, the Firebird, the Trans Am. These weren't just cars, they were attitudes. You could be a middle-class kid in Ohio or Southern California, and if you had a Pontiac, you felt like you were part of something faster, louder, and a little more dangerous. By the late 1970s, Pontiac was one of GM's strongest divisions. Then everything changed. Gas crises, emissions laws, insurance crackdowns. Muscle cars got strangled. And GM responded the only way it knew how at the time. Cost cutting, platform sharing, badge engineering. This is where Pontiac's real problems began. By the 1980s and 90s, Pontiac stopped being truly different. Same engines, same platforms, same interiors, different badges. If you parked a Pontiac Grand Am next to a Chevy Malibu, most people couldn't tell you why one existed instead of the other. That overlap mattered. Inside GM, brands weren't competing with Ford or Toyota. They were competing with each other. Pontiac was slowly losing its reason to exist. But on the outside, fans didn't notice yet, because Pontiac still had moments. The late 90s brought the Grand Prix. The early 2000s brought the revived GTO. The Solstice showed real promise. Pontiac kept teasing greatness, but teasing isn't the same as committing. And here's the thing most people don't understand. Pontiac wasn't allowed to win. Inside General Motors, Pontiac was trapped. If Pontiac got too good, it threatened Chevy. If it got too premium, it stepped on Buick. If it got too sporty, it challenged Corvette. So Pontiac lived in this weird middle space. Sporty, but not too sporty. Affordable, but not cheap. Exciting, but never fully unleashed. That kind of brand confusion is deadly. Now fast forward to the mid-2000s, GM is massive, but bloated. 8 major brands, thousands of dealerships, millions of obligations. Every car sold had to support pensions, healthcare, and layers of management. And the math was breaking. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, GM didn't just stumble. They collapsed. Car sales dropped off a cliff. Credit froze. GM was burning billions in cash every month. Washington stepped in. And suddenly, GM had to make choices it had avoided for decades. Hard choices. Painful choices. Which brands survive? Which brands die? This wasn't about emotion. It was about survival. Inside GM, analysts laid everything out. Sales volume, profit margins, brand overlap, future potential. And Pontiac showed up as a problem. Not because nobody liked it, but because it didn't own a clear space anymore. Chevy sold more cars. Buick was strong in China. GMC was highly profitable with trucks and SUVs. Cadillac was GM's global luxury bet. Pontiac was popular. But popularity doesn't pay bills if margins are thin. Pontiac cars sold, but didn't make enough money. Worse, many Pontiac buyers would just buy a Chevy if Pontiac disappeared. That was the fatal detail. From GM's perspective, killing Pontiac didn't mean losing customers. It meant moving them. That's a horrifying calculation when you're a fan. But when you're trying to save a company with hundreds of thousands of employees, it becomes cold math. Still, even with all that logic, Pontiac didn't die quietly. Inside the company, there was resistance. Engineers who loved the brand, designers who believed in its future, dealers who had built their lives around it. Some argued Pontiac should become GM's performance brand. Lean, focused, aggressive. But that required investment. And GM didn't have money. It required risk. And GM was done taking risks. Here's the part that hurts the most. Pontiac finally started getting good again right before it died. The G8, the Solstice GXP. Cars enthusiasts loved. Cars that proved Pontiac still had soul. But it was too late, because the decision wasn't about the next model year. It was about the next 20 years. GM needed fewer brands, not better ones. So in 2009, Pontiac was marked for death. No grand farewell, no final supercar. Just a quiet announcement. Production would stop. The brand would be retired. And just like that, a name that once defined American performance was gone. Imagine being a Pontiac employee that day. Imagine telling your kids. Imagine walking past a showroom knowing it would never sell another new car. That's the human side of this story. Pontiac wasn't killed because it failed. It was killed because it existed inside a system that didn't know how to let it succeed. And that's the real reason Pontiac died. GM didn't just kill a brand. They killed decades of internal compromise. Pontiac became the scapegoat for GM's inability to simplify sooner. And here's the moment that changes how you see everything. After Pontiac was gone, GM didn't suddenly become innovative overnight, but it became lighter, faster, more focused. Chevy got clearer, Cadillac got sharper, GMC leaned hard into trucks. The company survived. Pontiac didn't. That's the tragedy. Pontiac wasn't a bad brand. It was a trapped one, loved by fans, restricted by executives, and sacrificed to save the whole. Today, Pontiac lives on in memories, car meets, and YouTube clips. People still talk about what it could have been. And maybe that's why this story still stings. Because Pontiac didn't lose relevance. It lost permission. That's the real reason General Motors killed Pontiac. If you want to know which other iconic car brand was quietly set up to fail long before the public realized it, watch the next video on your screen. Subscribe for more real automotive stories. And comment below if Pontiac should have been saved, or if GM made the only choice it had left.